Hi everyone, we've seen plant tissues in my last video. This is about animal tissues. So if you haven't gone through the last lecture, please go through the last lecture first so this lecture will make sense to you. I have given the link in the comment and in the description section so you can visit earlier lecture as well. So here we are going to talk about animal tissues. Including human beings, and animal tissues are broadly classified into four groups. They are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. I'm sure you must have heard these names. Let's go through details of each of them. So epithelial tissue, have a look at this diagram here. This shows you different types of epithelial tissues, and they're basically classification, and depending on which source you read from, you will get one or two different names in this classification. And that is true for even for my medical education. When I learnt in medicine, we had different variations of these names, but usually the epithelial tissue is described to have 8 types: squamous epithelium, cuboidal epithelium, columnar epithelium, glandular epithelium, ciliated epithelium, sensory epithelium, stratified, and pseudostratified epithelium. So what is epithelial tissue? What is epithelium? It is the covering or a protective tissue which covers the whole body of animal from outside, as well as it covers the internal cavities and organs. So it acts as a barrier between the animal's internal structures and the environment, as well as it separates the internal structures from each other. So it's like a curtain. The skin, the lining of the mouth, lining of the blood vessels, lining of our airways, alveoli, kidney tubules, all these places, they have epithelium. Now let's go through more details of epithelium. Epithelial tissues, because they have to protect, they are the protective coverings, they are tightly packed and they are a continuous sheet over the body surface from either outside or inside. They have a small amount of cementing material between the cells, but there's no intercellular space because they have to be tight. So anything which is exchanged between outside and inside through the skin or the mucosal membranes or various epithelia in the body, epithelial tissue in the body, that has to pass through the epithelial cells, because there is no space between epithelial cells, there is no intercellular space. So because of the exchange of the material between two sides on either side of the epithelium depends on permeability of the cells of various epithelia. That means how easily the cells give permission to certain substances, electrolytes, certain minerals or nutrients. It decides how much of that substance will be transferred across the epithelial membrane. Now all the epithelium layers, they rest on basement membrane. It is a extracellular fibrous structure which separates the epithelium from the underlying cells, underlying structures. And now let's have a look at few of these types, the 8 types I described to you. Let's have a look at simple squamous epithelium. Now simple squamous is a very extremely flat epithelium, and it forms a delicate lining. Now the esophagus, which starts from the pharynx in our throat, continues into the esophagus, and that empties food contents into the stomach in our abdomen. The esophagus lining, the inner lining of the mouth, inside of the mouth, they are squamous epithelia. Now these epithelia are also present, epithelium is also present on the skin, and it protects the body. Because the skin epithelium has got different layers, there are many layers of epithelium tissue. You can see in the diagram the stratified squamous epithelium. There are various layers, multiple layers, which are important because skin undergoes wear and tear, and because of the layer pattern, this epithelium of the skin is called as stratified squamous epithelium. Now, in some places, the epithelium is columnar epithelium. It is in the form of elongated columns. So, the places where absorption and secretion takes place, such as the inner lining of the intestine, the epithelial cells are tall. They are like columns, pillars, and it is called as columnar epithelium. This facilitates the movement of nutrients across the epithelial barrier because of this specific arrangement of the cells. In respiratory tract, the epithelium, which is basically a columnar epithelium, just like the intestinal tract, these epithelia have got hair-like projections on the outer surface of the cells, and these hair-like projections are called as cilia. So cilia are there on the outer surface and they move. The cilia make movements. Their movement pushes the mucus which is secreted by the cells of the respiratory tract, the mucosa of the respiratory tract. They secrete a sticky substance called mucus. That mucus is pushed out by the cilia of ciliated columnar epithelium, which is lining the respiratory tract. You can see that in the diagram here. The respiratory tract has got different types of cells in the mucosa. One of them is ciliated cell, which sweeps the debris off. The other type is goblet cells. It secretes the sticky mucus, and there are various different other types as well. You don't need to go into much details at this stage. So that's about ciliated columnar epithelium cells. Now, various conditions such as environmental pollution, smoking, or certain infections due to bacteria, viruses, they can damage this ciliated function, ciliated columnar cells, and the cilia may not function well in polluted environment in smokers, and that can give rise to retention of the mucus, which is the secretion of the respiratory tract. It can be retained, it doesn't come out effectively, and that can give rise to infections of respiratory tract. So upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract infection, that is also known as pneumonia. So cilia are very important. Ciliated columnar epithelium is very important for proper functioning and safety of airways. Now, next type of epithelium, which is present in renal tubules, it is a cuboidal epithelium. So it is like a cube. You can see in the diagram. So these are cuboidal epithelium in the renal tubule, and they are resting on the basement membrane. So every epithelium rests on basement membrane, which is a fibrous structure. Now, they are also present in the ducts of salivary glands, where they provide mechanical support as well. Now, in the glands are the structures which secrete different important chemical substances, secretions, which are important for our body, especially for digestion. There are other glands which secrete hormones and other chemicals, but especially in relation to the gastrointestinal tract, we have glands. Now, the glands are modified epithelium. The portion of the epithelium dips down, it folds inwards, and it gives rise to multicellular gland. This epithelium, which specializes in secreting various substances, is called as glandular epithelium. So let's go through connective tissue. Now, what is connective tissue? As the name suggests, it connects. It connects different parts. It connects different organs. It connects different tissues in the body. So they do three functions broadly. One is to connect. Second is to fill up the space. So they act as as a packing substance, packing tissue. And third is they form a part of structural framework. So very important tissue. Now there are three elements to each connective tissue in general. First is cells. So they have cells. Second is they have fibers. Not all of them have fibers. Blood doesn't have fibers in it. The third element of connective tissue is a ground substance, which is a substance which lies between the cells, extracellular space. So it is also known as intercellular substance, ground substance. Now, what is the matrix, intercellular matrix? So it is a network of proteins and other molecules that lie outside the cell. They surround the cell, they support the cell, and give structure to cell and tissue of the body. So that is intercellular matrix, and ground substance is a part of intercellular matrix. So it's easy to understand. You don't need to know many details of intercellular matrix or ground substance. Just remember this at the moment, that ground substance is a part of intercellular matrix, and it is the substance which lies outside the cell. It supports, it helps in shaping of the cell, and it surrounds the cell. Now there are fibers, there are cells, and there is a ground substance. So fibers are of three types. They are collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. So they lie in different connective tissues, and their proportion in the connective tissues differs, and that's why the characteristic of connective tissue is different. Different connective tissues have different characteristics because their composition of the cells, fibers, and ground substance is different. So collagen fibers are made up of collagen proteins, and they have fibril bundles. So they are made up of bundles of fibrils, small tiny microscopic fibers. Elastic fibers are made up of elastic protein, and they are elastic. That means they can be stretchable when needed. So the tissue which has got more elastin fibers are stretchable tissue. Now the reticular fiber has got reticular protein, and they form reticulum, that is network, mesh. It is a reticulum word for mesh or network. So you can see all the fibers are made up of proteins basically. Now cells which are there in connective tissue, again they can be of three types based on the nature of the ground substance they produce. So ground substance is produced by the cells in the connective tissue, and the cells also give rise to fibers. So depending on the ground substance character, there can be three types of connective tissue cells, connective tissues. That is connective tissue proper, one. Second is skeletal connective tissue. It is also called as supportive connective tissue. And third is fluid connective tissue. Now connective tissue proper can be loose connective tissue or dense connective tissue. As the name suggests, loose means the structures of this tissue are loosely arranged, and dense connective tissue, the structures here, the fibers, cells are densely packed. Loose connective tissue is either areolar tissue or adipose tissue. Dense connective tissue, you can see in this classification, the main two types which are relevant for your level are tendon and ligament, which are mentioned at the bottom of this classification diagram. Now loose connective tissue, this has got semi-fluid matrix. So the matrix is not very dense, it is a semi-fluid, and it has got less fibers. And what are the fibers in loose connective tissue? They are collagen and elastin. And you know collagen gives tensile strength, elastin fibers give elasticity to the connective tissue, and loose connective tissue has got collagen and elastin. The cells and the fibers are scattered in matrix, which is semi-fluid. Now, as I mentioned, the loose connective tissues are of two types, areolar and adipose. Now, let us look into little bit details of areolar and adipose tissue. You don't need many details at this stage. So, whatever are mentioned in your basic books, and in addition, I have taken few more details from other sources, so listen to them. Areolar connective tissue is found between skin and muscle. So between skin and the underlying muscle there is an areolar connective tissue. It is also found around blood vessels and around nerves and inside the bone, in the bone marrow. Yeah, so these are the locations of areolar connective tissue. It fills up the space inside the organs. So our body organs, wherever there is an empty space, there is a packing of areolar tissue. And it supports the internal organs and it helps in repair of the tissue as well. So I have said there are three components of any connective tissue: matrix, fibers, and cells. So matrix of areolar connective tissue is sticky, it is transparent, and it is jelly-like. The fibers, there are all three types of fibers present in areolar tissue. So what are the three types of fibers? If you remember, I just mentioned three types of fiber. These are collagen, elastic, and reticular. So areolar connective tissue has got all three fibers. Now cells and fibers are scattered in the matrix randomly. You can see in this diagram. So ground substance lies outside the cells. There are elastin, collagen, and reticular fibers spread everywhere. And there are fibroblast cells lying in the areolar connective tissue. Now, what are the functions of areolar connective tissue? We know the connective tissue has got three functions. It connects, it fills up the space, and it gives structural support. So areolar tissue does the three functions. So it connects the skin to the muscles, it fills up the space around the organs, holds them in place, and it gives structural support to the organs. It gives strength and elasticity to the organs. Now, second loose connective tissue is fat storing adipose tissue. It is found in various locations, and I have got the diagram for its locations where the fat tissue is found. So you can see it is there under the skin. It is called as superficial and deep subcutaneous fat. It is found between internal organs. So every organ in the body, liver, pancreas, kidney, intestines, heart, they have fat around them, fat pads, especially kidneys have got fat pads. And the cells of this tissue are filled with fat globules. If you look at human body, about 20 to 25% of the body weight is due to fat. It varies. Some people it is more fat, some people it is less fat. So again, what is the composition of areolar tissue, adipose tissue? So what is the composition of adipose tissue? So matrix, it is sticky, transparent, jelly-like. Fibers, they are collagen and elastin, less or no reticular fibers, and cells and fibers are scattered in matrix randomly. And what are the cells? They are called as adipocytes. So you can see in this diagram, these adipocytes, they are more in amount than fibers. So less fibers, more cells. They are filled with fat globules. You can see the whole, almost whole of the cell is filled with yellow fat globule. Nucleus is pushed to the periphery and there is very little cytoplasm in adipocytes. Now, most common locations I have already mentioned to you. They are subcutaneous, visceral, that is around the body organs including heart, lung, kidney, intestines, liver, pancreas, and bone marrow. Bone marrow also has got substantial amount of fat. So this is a nice representation of location of adipose tissue in the human body. Now what does fat do? So fat has got very important function. Apart from insulating the body and preventing heat loss, it also does padding of the body. So it supports different parts of the body such as joints, muscles, bones, and different organs. So the fat is an energy source, so it is utilized by the body uh, in a long term as well as in emergency. Hormone production is important role of adipocytes, and thermogenesis, generation of heat in newborn, that is neonates, and it is done by brown adipose tissue. It's a special type of tissue which generates very high amount of energy in neonates, which is required for safety and survival of the neonates. Now let's go to dense connective tissue. So dense connective tissue again has got three parts: cells, fibers, and matrix. Dense connective tissue has got fibroblast cells which generate fibers. Fibers are tough, white, and fibrous, and they are mainly collagen, and the matrix is less in amount. So again, cells are fibroblasts, fibers are collagen, they are tough, white, and matrix is less. So that's about dense connective tissue. What are the examples of dense connective tissue? Two: tendons and ligaments. So what are tendons? Tendons are the dense connective tissue. These are dense, tough, fibrous bands which connect muscle to the bone. They are fibrous tissue with great strength, but there is very little elasticity, flexibility. So that is tendon. You can see in this diagram, this is a calf muscle, gastrocnemius muscle, and the brown color is muscle, and then it continues as a Achilles tendon. You can feel that tendon behind your ankle. You can catch that tendon, and that Achilles tendon attaches the gastrocnemius muscle to the bones at ankle joint. So tendon attaches bone muscle to the bone, and it's a tough fibrous structure. Now let's go to ligament. The ligaments are again dense connective tissue. Two bones are connected by ligament. Have a look at this diagram. So this is a diagram of hip joint. The bone above is a pelvic bone, and the bone below in this diagram, the lower one, is a femur bone. It's a thigh bone, and these two bones are connected at hip joint. Now the white fibrous structures, the white fibrous bands seen here are ligaments. These are hip joint ligaments. They connect one bone to the other bone, and that is called ligament. These are quite elastic, so it gives flexibility to the joint movement. Now it also gives strength to the joint. Without these ligaments, these joints will be very, very weak. Now ligaments contain very little matrix because it's a dense connective tissue, and it has got lots and lots of fibers. Now next is the skeletal connective tissue, and as the name suggests, skeletal means related to bones. Now bone is an example of skeletal connective tissue. It is very strong. It is non-flexible. Understand that if the bones were flexible, we would bend in the middle of the arm, in the middle of the forearm, our spine would bend abnormally. That is why the bones are not flexible. They are non-flexible, strong, so that our internal organs, blood vessels, nerves, they are protected. They don't get squeezed or crushed. That's why bones have to be non-flexible. Now let us look at the structure of the bone, and I have taken this diagram for you to understand the structure of the bone. The bone cells are embedded in hard matrix that is composed of calcium and phosphorus compounds. So it has got calcium carbonate. It has also got minerals of calcium and magnesium salts, and they are inorganic minerals. Inorganic means opposite to organic. Organic is which is produced by the body. Inorganic is which is taken from outside not produced by the body. So bone cells lie in the matrix. Matrix is hard and fibers are collagen more proportion compared to the matrix. So there are more fibers in comparison to matrix. And fibers are produced by the cells called as osteoblasts. So we have seen every connective tissue has got three parts in general: bone cells, matrix, fibers. Now we know the matrix in the bone is hard, solid. It is made up of inorganic materials like calcium, magnesium salts, collagen proteins. That is why, because of the minerals, it is called as mineralized matrix. The matrix is arranged in the form of concentric rings, and these are called as laminae. And the bone cells are arranged along these laminae, and the bone cells are called as osteoblasts. When they mature, they become less active and they are called as osteocytes. They are arranged along the concentric laminae. So that is about the structure of the bone. Now, what are the functions of the bone? The bones, they provide framework to the body that supports the body, and the framework of the bone is called as endoskeleton. You must have seen the skeleton of human being, that is called endoskeleton. Now bones provide anchors to the muscles and they support main organs of the body. They develop, and the bones, they generate the blood cells. They are formed in bone marrow, and they also act as a storage of blood cells. So in that respect, bone has got very important function in immunity, because white blood cells are also generated in this mechanism. The storage of minerals takes place in bone because it is a massive mineralized body tissue, dense connective tissue, skeleton tissue, and bones help in movement. If there were no bones in human body, we would have very difficult movements. We would find it very difficult to move faster, run faster. Bones are also important in hormone regulation. Now let us look at the second type of skeletal connective tissue, that is cartilage. Now cartilage are of three types. These are hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. You don't need to go into details of these cartilages at this stage. Just know that there are three types of cartilages. Now structure, because it's a skeletal connective tissue has got three parts: cells, matrix, fibers. Now cells in the cartilage, they are widely spaced, so they are widely placed in the cartilage tissue. Matrix is a solid and it is composed of proteins and sugars. Fibers are collagen and elastic fibers. In hyaline cartilage, type 2 collagen makes up to 40% of the hyaline cartilage. Elastic cartilage contains mainly elastic fibers, and fibrocartilage contains more collagen than hyaline cartilage. So these are the three cartilage types, and they differ because they have different composition of the fibers. Now, where are these cartilages located? They are located. Now, where are these cartilages located? So cartilages make the bony ends smooth, bony surfaces smooth at joints. They are also present in nose. So this is a cartilage. Your nose can move here. Ear, you can see that flexible part, that's a cartilage. They are there in the trachea, tracheal cartilage. They are in the form of rings. The rings are C-shaped. They are not complete round, and they are there in the larynx as well, laryngeal cartilages. Now we can fold the cartilages in ear, but the cartilages which are there in joints, they are not flexible like the nasal or ear cartilage. They are quite firm and inflexible. What is the function of cartilage? They shape, they support, and they help in structure of body tissues. They form cushioning of the joints, and they help in the development and growth of the bones. So very important part of the cartilage. If the cartilage is damaged, then the joint starts hurting. In osteoarthritis, which is the disease of bone joints, people start hurting their joints. The joint aches, joint pain, so the joint hurts, and people find it difficult to move. In that circumstances, when the bone and the cartilages are damaged, people need to go to doctor, take treatment, and if they cannot resolve the pain, sometimes the joints are replaced, and that is total knee surgery or total hip surgery, or other joints are replaced as well. So let's have a look at fluid connective tissue. Now fluid, as the name suggests, it's a liquid tissue, and there are two types, blood and lymph. We don't need to see lymph at this stage because it's too much detail for you. Now, let's have a look at blood, but very superficial introduction, because for your level you don't need to read or learn about blood in great details. So blood is a fluid connective tissue, and as we said, three parts: matrix, cells, and fibers. We'll look into this, why how it is different from other connective tissue. So there is a matrix, and it is called as plasma. So blood has a fluid matrix, and in that there are red blood cells, there are white blood cells, and there are platelets. So matrix and cells. Now plasma, what is plasma? Plasma is made up of different proteins, hormones, salts, and blood flows from one organ to the other. Heart pumps the blood to various organs, and the blood is then collected back to the heart through venous system. From heart it is pumped to the different body parts by arterial system. We know this. And the blood carries gases, oxygen from lungs to different body parts, carbon dioxide from peripheral body parts to the lungs. That is the function of blood. Now it also carries food, hormone, waste products from one part to the other. We know the cells are red blood cell, RBCs, WBCs, and platelets, and there are no fibers in blood. So have a look at this diagram. What is blood made up of? The blood has got plasma, that is matrix, cells, these are red blood cell, white blood cell, and platelets. So plasma is 55%. It has got water, protein, electrolyte, gases, salts, hormones, and the rest of the cells, red blood cells, are about 44 to 45%, and there is a very little platelet and white blood cells. Let's talk about functions of blood in brief. So it transports gases, it transports nutrients and waste products, it transports immune cells, so it has a very good role, important function in immunity. It helps in heat regulation because it carries heat from one part to the other, from periphery to center, from center to periphery, and that helps in heat regulation. That blood is important aspect in a physiological process called homeostasis, which is maintaining the balance in different systems of the body. And blood also has a function of clotting, which helps in preventing blood loss when the blood vessel is punctured. Now let's look at two special types of tissues. One of them is muscular tissue, and the last will be nervous tissue. So this is the last part of this lecture now. Muscular tissue have got elongated cells. They are called as muscle fibers. And this tissue is basically responsible for movement. If there were no muscles, it will be very, very difficult for us to move. Now, the muscles are of two main types: voluntary muscles and non-voluntary muscles. The voluntary muscles, they can be moved by will. So that is voluntary action of the muscles. Now muscles present in our limbs, in our trunk, neck, facial muscles, we can move them. If I want, I can lift my arm up. If I want, I can punch something, or I can withdraw my arm. I can run, I can climb, I can bend forward. So these are voluntary actions, and these muscles which perform these actions are called voluntary muscles. Now they are also known as skeletal muscles because they are attached to the bones and they help to move the bone. So what is the function of the muscle? It is to help to move the bone. Now let us look at the structure of these muscles. Now if we look at under microscope and take a fiber of voluntary muscle, skeletal muscle, it will show alternate bands of light and dark areas. These are also called as striations, and that is why these muscles are also called as striated muscles, because of their looks. The cells are long, they are cylindrical, they do not branch, and they have multiple nuclei. So you can see in this diagram how the skeletal muscle cells look. There are three important points of the structure under microscope. So they are long, cylindrical, they do not have branches, and they have multiple nuclei. So they are multinucleate. Now there are three layers of connective tissue in relation to the skeletal muscles, and I can show you in the diagram how these three layers appear. That's the skeletal muscle attached to the bone through tendon. We just learned that muscles are attached to the bones through tendon, and now the muscle has been sectioned. So this is a transverse section of the skeletal muscle, and it shows epimysium, the outer connective tissue layer which surrounds the whole muscle is called epimysium. And there are these different layers inside the epimysium. The perimysium surrounds the muscle fascicle bundles, and the endomysium surrounds the single individual muscle fiber. So epi, peri, endomysium, these are connective tissue layers. So that should make it clear. You don't need more details than this at this stage, but in your higher classes you will have more details of the microscopic anatomy, the histology of these muscle fibers, and I'm sure you will enjoy it that time. But let's not go into details at this stage. Now, second type of muscle group is involuntary muscle group, and these are called involuntary because we cannot control their actions. The actions are controlled by our brain's sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So their actions are involuntary. Now, where are these located? They are located in our alimentary canal. You can see in the diagram. They are also located in blood vessels. So they are called smooth muscles here, and they are located in the eyes, in the iris. Now these are different locations. They are there in various blood vessels, internal organs, eyes, where there is involuntary control. They are there in the respiratory tract as well, starting from upper respiratory tract, the trachea, bronchi, and smaller airways as well. And there when they contract, the airway contracts. When the muscles relax, the airway relaxes. And you might have heard of asthma. When there is excessive contraction of these muscles in airways, lower airways, it gives rise to asthma symptoms. So the sound of the breathing becomes wheezy, and that's why we give medicines through inhaler. We give them pump or nebulizer. The medicine goes through the respiratory tract and it helps to relax the smooth muscles. It dilates the air passages and the patient feels better. So that's about smooth muscles in airway tracts. There are smooth muscles in genitourinary tract as well, in the ureters, in the bladder, in uterus, and they have their roles there. So let us look at the cells in these involuntary muscles, smooth muscles. The cells are long. You can see in the diagram. They are elongated. They are spindle shaped, so narrow at both ends. There is a single nucleus which is located in the center of the cell, and there are no alternate light and dark bands. There are no striations. So they are also called as unstriated muscles. So remember the names: involuntary muscles, smooth muscles, unstriated muscles. Now, muscles of the heart are involuntary muscles as well. And heart muscles, they contract and relax regularly. It is called as rhythmic contraction and relaxation. And does it stop? No, it doesn't stop. If it stops, the life ends. So it starts from even before we are born. Inside mother's womb, the heart muscle starts contracting and relaxing, and it continues to beat throughout the life till person dies, animal dies, when the heart stops working. And if it starts working prematurely, say in a patient, it is called as cardiac arrest, and it's a serious situation. If it is not treated within few minutes, then there is a likely chance that patient will die or animal will die. That is why resuscitation of the patients from cardiac arrest is a very important aspect of emergency medicine. Now, cardiac muscles, these are, I'll show you in the diagram. The heart is made up of muscles. So if the heart muscles are looked under microscope, they will look as a cylindrical. But the difference between cardiac and striated skeletal muscle is that there is a branching of the muscle cells in cardiac muscles. There are no striations, and you can see multiple branches in this diagram, and the nucleus is single, which is located towards the center, and there are branches. So again, to revise, it is branched, cylindrical, uninucleate cell, the cardiac cell. So let us now have a look at last part of this chapter, which is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is very important part of the body. Without nervous tissue, it is impossible to imagine a good existence or even the existence of any organism. Nervous system is there in every animal, as well as the detection system exists in plants as well. So very important system which keeps us conscious, awake. It makes us think. So important system for us. All the cells have got ability to respond to stimuli, all the body cells. But the nervous tissue are very specialized in that sense. They can respond to the stimuli and they can transmit the stimulus. That stimulus transmission is very fast. Imagine somebody pricks you at the finger. You immediately withdraw the hand. Why this happens? Because that painful stimulus of needle prick is transmitted by the nerves to the brain instantly, and that's why you withdraw. Same thing happens if there is a trauma, there is a burn, you immediately withdraw. That is about fast transmission of the signal of the stimulus by nervous tissue. So withdrawal happens because the brain orders the muscles to contract and it withdraws. So it happens very fast, and this is a speciality of nervous tissue. The brain in your in the skull, the spinal cord which is there in our vertebra, the vertebral bodies have got a spinal cavity at the back, and the spinal cord passes through that. The nerves, spinal cord and the brain, they together form nervous system. And there is a central nervous system made up of brain and spinal cord, and there is a peripheral nervous system which is made up of nerves, nerve fibers. Now the cells of these nerves are called as nerve cells or neurons. The neuron structure I have shown here in this diagram. You can see there is a cell body, and there is a nucleus and cytoplasm inside the cell body, and there are hair-like parts. So these hair-like parts can be of two types. Usually there is a single long part or process, it is called as axon, and there are many short branched parts which are called as dendrites. So cell body and processes. The processes are of two types. Long ones are called axon, there is usually a single axon, and multiple branched processes, they are called as dendrites. And the nerve cell can be of different length. It can extend for a 1 meter distance. So imagine a nerve fiber traveling from skin of the finger to the spinal cord. That could be 1 meter. From the toe tip to the spinal cord, it could be 1 meter. Now the signal that goes along the nerve fiber, along the nerve cell, is called as nerve impulse. And the nerve impulses, as I said, allow us to feel, as well as they order muscles to contract, to take action. That happens because of the fast nerve impulse traveling along the nerve fiber. Now there are various types of nerve cells in nervous tissue. There are mainly two types. One is actual nerve cell, which is called neuron. I've just shown you the diagram. This is a conducting cell. It transmits impulse from periphery to the center, or center to the periphery. And this is a structural unit of nervous system. The other type of cells are called as glial cells. So neuron and glial cells. The glial cells are also called as neuroglia. Now there are 4 types of neuroglia. You don't need details of them, but I'm just giving you idea, just mentioning their names. Astrocytes, microglial cells, ependymal cells, and oligodendrocytes. So 4 types of neuroglia. The 2 types of neuroglia which are found in peripheral nervous system are satellite cells and Schwann cells. So 4 types of neuroglia are there in central nervous system, that is brain and spinal cord, and 2 types of neuroglial cells are there in which are satellite cells and Schwann cells. They exist in peripheral nervous system. Very important chapter. It's actually when I studied this, I started studying these things in my medical school. I didn't even know about these tissues in my junior college level, but now the syllabus has been made more difficult, more extensive, more competitive. So these all things are there in a very superficial form from year 8, 9, 10 level. So I hope you understand this. If you haven't understood any of this, go through the video again, speak to your teachers, and I'll come back with few more topics in biology for you. So stay connected. Take care. Bye bye.